Welcome to the Grazing Podcast, episode 15, where we talk with August Horstmann of Horstmann Cattle Company.
I'd say learn as much as you can and visit with as many people as possible.
You're listening to the Grazing Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. In today's show, we talk with August Horstmann of Horstmann Cattle Company, and we talk about his journey to regenerative agriculture as a first-generation regenerative agriculturalist on a third-generation farm, and what he's doing with cattle as well as with hogs and chickens. I think you'll enjoy it. Before we get to today's conversation, be sure and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Also, leave us a review and share this episode with someone who might enjoy it. We appreciate you. August, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Can you tell us a little bit about you and your operation?
I can. So, my wife and I own and operate, I guess what we call a first generational regenerative farm on a third generation farmer land.
So you have a third generational farm and you have made the transition to more regenerative practices.
Yeah, so it started back. It's my grandpa's farm, now my dad's farm. He started back in about 2012, 2013. That winter there, I was in between my first and second semester as a freshman at Mizzou, and majoring in animal science, learning what some people would call prescriptive cattle management, the feed, the inputs, the whole gamma of everything that goes along with a university telling you how to raise cattle, teaching you how to raise cattle. Well, fast forward to December of 15. That's I graduated from Mizzou with a major in animal science, minor in ag econ. And I was going to set out and farm the family's farm, raise cattle. And about 3 months in, I figured out that the way they had taught me was not the right way, and that I was going to have to get an off-farm job just to kind of support myself and not the farm per se, but I knew the farm wasn't going to support me. It's not sustainable, or come to find out a new term, regenerative. It wasn't sustainable for a whole multitude of reasons. Cow herd, stayability in our cow herd, our pocketbook couldn't sustain the inputs, and our soil couldn't sustain being abused. And so this whole regenerative term, never heard of, never knew anything about. And it wasn't until, let's see, I worked, so starting in May of 2016, I worked for a year for the equipment dealer in town, the local New Holland dealer, and figured out that I needed to, get all this equipment to make my farm go. But luckily I didn't have the money, so I just was a dreamer. And so so about after a year of working for them, a local job with the soil and water came up, and with an animal science degree, I applied and got the job. And the first day on the job, a guy handed me a Post-it note. I guess he was I guess you'd call him a coworker, and he handed me a post-it note, and it had four names on it: Greg Judy, Dr. Alan Williams, Ray Archuleta, and Gabe Brown. And from there, you could say I caught the bug, and the rest is history.
Very good. So you got those four names. What'd you go do?
Well, as some people will tell you, government work, right? So that meant a lot of hours spent on YouTube learning so I could better serve the local farmers in our community. But so I just attended YouTube University while at the government job.
That works out really nice.
Yeah, I don't know how many people would be happy with me saying that, but at this point, it's the truth, and that's how I got to where I am. So, with that, I just watched YouTube, read Greg Judy's books. Gabe Brown's book wasn't out yet. That was in, I believe it was 17, the spring of 17, when I started getting engaged with regenerative agriculture.
Very good. And so you started watching these YouTube videos, started reading these books. What was the first action you took on your farm?
I cold turkeyed the entire farm. That's that's a good question.
Oh,
So,
yes.
so we cold turkeyed grain, we cold turkeyed antibiotics in our mineral, we cold turkeyed fertilizer, we let's see, what did we do? We stopped baling hay and bought hay. We did it all. Everything that those videos talked about, we implemented. And I'll tell you what, we had a bunch of wrecks.
So you implement all those things. So what happened? You had a bunch of wrecks. So tell us some of those wrecks.
Well, we had basically since 15, we're now in 17, kind of going on 18. And we had been developing this cow herd that required all these inputs. We required our cows required grain, our replacement heifers required grain, our bulls required grain because we were following the prescription from the university, right? We were chasing numbers instead of profitability. And so what we were seeing was when we started to cold turkey everything, our cows basically, it was a night and day difference on what was actually working and what was earning a living based off the inputs we gave. So that first year we culled 25% of our cows that were due that fall that were open because they weren't
Oh,
receiving
wow.
the the supplements needed to stay in shape to rebreed.
And what kind of breeding did you have at that point? You talked about chasing numbers. Did you have certain breeds? What size were your cows?
That's a good question. So we bought a set of commercial black cows, and then we were breeding them to registered Angus bulls. I was a college student, couldn't afford the best bulls, but we tried to buy $4,000 to $5,000 bulls based off numbers, because I mean we paid for an education, and if you're going to pay that kind of money for a university education, then I mean I would have assumed that what they were telling me was right. So we went and bought these bulls, that were fed silage and haylage and grain and on self feeders to make the numbers, and then breeding them to our commercial cows.
One thing before we go forward, let's jump back just a little bit. Were
Yes, sir.
these the type of cattle your dad and grandpa had ran, or had you all, um, what had they ran?
Okay, that's a good question. My dad does not run cattle. He is not a cattleman. He likes the farm, but doesn't know anything about cattle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, my grandpa actually had just a small herd of beefalo, and they were low input. He
Oh,
rotationally grazed, but he didn't quite get the benefits of like strip grazing and stuff. It was pretty basic rotational grazing. He had just 4 or 5 pastures that he'd moved to when he thought was right.
so he was doing a lot for his time, though.
Yeah, not knowingly though.
Oh,
He
yes.
I don't think he was knowingly doing that. He just bought the breed that kind of allowed him to live in St. Louis and travel out to his farm, which was about 60 miles away, three times a week. Until I went to school, that's when my grandma and grandpa both moved to the farm. Roughly, was they built a house and actually moved
Oh,
out
okay.
to the farm, and so it started. My grandpa did beefalo. He bought the original farm in the 70s, kind of transferred over to beefalo, was on the breed association board and kind of a pioneer in getting the breed going. And he wasn't, he, I guess when I started going down this Angus path, he always gave me a hard time on about being an Angus commercial Angus guy, jokingly, and
Yes.
talking profitability a little bit, but I was the one going to school. I'm the one that went to school to be a farmer, not him. So why would I listen to him when the education I'm paying for is telling me that what he's doing isn't right?
Right, yes. So you got these commercial Angus cows and you're breeding them, or commercial black cows. You're breeding them to these high number Angus bulls, and then you get introduced to Greg Judy, Gabe Brown, and the others you listed.
Yep.
What did you went cold turkey on feed? What'd you do on genetics?
Well, I went cold turkey on feed and had an absolute train wreck because the bulls I was breeding my cows to weren't used to that, and
Oh, yes.
no one makes an Angus bull really that, or in what I at the time, no one made an Angus bull that was not used to eating grain. Come to find out now, and today's time, there's a few guys out there that are doing it, but back then I had no idea. So I met a friend in college, and he was close by, and I started buying bulls from them, and I would go to him and say I'd like the bull that didn't stand at the feeder, and that's what he would sell me, and I started getting along pretty good with the bulls that weren't at the feeder.
Very good.
And so from then, he kind of ran his course, and that bull I bought from him, I kept a couple bulls out of, um, and then it was, I guess, the spring of 2018. I kind of got introduced into the South Poles, and it started with us actually hearing a guy at a conference talking about these South Pole cattle he was grazing and then finishing for his meat business. And after I heard him spoke, I walked up to him and said, I'd like to graze some cattle for you. And kind of out of nowhere, he's like, "Well, that sounds good." And I asked how many, and he's like, "Well, how many do you want?" And I just threw out a number. I said 75, and we took on 75 South Pole steers in spring of 2018, and that was my introduction to the breed, and that's where we're kind of heading now.
That is a very interesting. You took the initiative, you approached him and offered how could you help him. And, and that's a great way for if someone's looking for some knowledge. And if you go up to someone and you just want to pick their brain, they've got a lot of things to do, but how can I help you? That's a great in.
Yeah, so once we got in there, I mean, I continued. So the spring of 18, I ran my Angus and Sim Angus bulls. I ran them with a cow, with our commercial Angus cow herd, and incorporated a 75 head of South Pole steers. And that's when we started noticing a bunch of different things. We started noticing natural fly control. We started noticing that cattle were grazing. The South Poles were grazing longer into the day, coming out earlier in the afternoons, especially during the summertime, and that no matter what kind of forage we threw at them, that they were gaining weight. And it was to that guy that he said, "Sure, you can buy some cattle from me and graze them for me, and I'll buy them back." And I mean, that was huge and a key part of kind of our regenerative story, and that's kind of where it really started.
So you're grazing these steers, you're grazing them with your steers, you're seeing how good the South Poles do. What does that do to your cow herd? Do you change that up
Yeah.
any?
Yep. We after that spring breeding season, I guess that was 18. We sold all of our bulls, and we tried to find some South Pole bulls. They're pretty hard to find at certain times of the year. So I found a
They are.
seven-year old South Pole bull for our fall breeding season, and picked him up. And I tell you what, he was one of the best bulls I've ever owned. And so we started implementing them in the fall of 2018, and that's all we run on our commercial cows.
Oh, very good. I do notice in this area, locating some South Pole genetics is a little difficult.
Yeah, it depends. When I went to the field day, they said that the better, you can Angus bulls, they compared it. Angus bulls are expensive. Angus cows are cheaper. South Pole bulls are cheaper, while South Pole cows are more expensive. So the best way to get in is cheaper Angus cows and cheaper South Pole bulls.
That sounds like a great recipe there.
Yeah, well, those 50-50 calves, some even if they come out blacks, majority of the time we're seeing them carry majority of the positive characteristics of a South Pole, and that's in their hide, the number of hairs per square inch. So they're shorter hided or slick hided with more squares per square inch, and they're black. And they seem to, once you get the slicker hide and the more hairs per square inch, you see a better fly resistance,
Oh, yes.
and you see them coming out. You see them carrying the same grazing characteristics as red-hided animals,
Oh, very nice.
and that was from running over kind of our observation from running. We've probably ran over 300 head of South Pole steers alone, and now we've got uh South Pole cross heifers due to calve. Our first round of South Pole heifers are due to calve this spring. A true spring calving season, I'll add, which is for Missouri, which is late March to April.
Very good. Now, on your 50% South Pole heifers, did you breed them back to South Pole?
Yes, sir. We're trying to get to about a three quarter blood South Pole. We think those are going to work well for us, especially since we do it all. We're spring and fall calving. We are a backgrounding operation. We are also a finishing operation, and we finish beef for ourselves. We sell 7 to 8 weight steers for other guys to finish for their antibiotic free, hormone free, regeneratively raised pasture protein business. We cover all the cattle spectrums to try to service as many people as possible, especially in the regenerative agriculture sector.
Very nice. And you have these cows grazing what kind of forages?
Our basic forage is fescue pasture, which has some legume components to it. It is got a lot of forbs, which some people call weeds. We call them forbs because cows will eat just about everything. We've been selecting and culling, and we've been culling about the bottom 20% of our herd every year. And so our cows are eating all varieties of iron weeds and I'm drawing blanks on all of it right now because it's because we're in the dormant season. But ragweed, common, giant, Lunsford ragweed, our cows are consuming it all. Goldenrod, our cows will eat it all.
You're fairly early on this regenerative journey, but what have you noticed in your short periods happening to your pastures?
Well, that's a great question. By utilizing adaptive grazing with varying stock densities, um, just by grazing alone, we can take a Lunsford ragweed paddock. Our paddocks are roughly 10 acres. We and Lunsford ragweed, most guys will tell you the cows won't eat it, which is the shortest variety of ragweed. And we can utilize ultra high density stock grazing. So that is, about 1 million pounds plus per acre. And on 2 hour moves, it takes some time, but on 2 hour moves, we can completely alter that forage for the following year.
Oh, yes.
So we're doing a lot. Our cows go to work for us now. And that was, learned over the years once we started this regenerative practice and going to the Soil Health Academy and utilizing Understanding Ag. We really got a game plan and focused on our cattle grazing and utilizing our cattle instead of equipment.
Yeah, much better. Um, in the teaching field, I hear sometimes, if a student can do it, let them do it. You know, in in the regenerative agriculture or grass farmer, if the cow can do it, let her do it.
Exactly. Exactly. So, like, for example, I started a new job as a ranch foreman. Uh, I guess that would have been September of 2019. And I spent the first 2 months brush hogging all of his farms. Well, this year I implemented polywire and step in posts and only brush hogged for a
Oh,
week.
that's much nicer.
Yeah, especially on me and his fuel bill.
Oh, yes. So you mentioned polywire and step in posts. Tell us a little bit more about the equipment you use for your rotational grazing.
Yes, so we use on our cow herd, we use Terragate reels with, well, currently we're using Terragate wire because where we can buy them, they come spooled for us, which is a big
It
plus.
is.
And then we use, yeah, we found that Zietlow Distributing Company they're making their own pigtail post, and it's a little heavier. I think it's 10 mil instead of an 8 mil post, so it's a little more durable post. So we use those on our cow herd. And then our pastured pork operation, we use O'Brien step-ins, and trying to switch over to the O'Briens, but the
Oh, yeah.
price is what's holding us back.
I see on your Instagram page you have one of those pigtails covered in ice holding up a wire.
Yeah, yep. My wife does all of our Instagram and Facebook and social media, and actually, she does all of our day to day, all of our cattle moves, and we've got pastured pork and pasture layers and pasture broilers and our own meat beef, our own pastured beef as
Yeah,
well.
we've been focused on talking about cattle, but you guys are doing a lot there.
Yeah, we're doing it all. So we're experimenting with pastured pork to make silvo pastures or savannas to for grazable cattle, because that's one of our downsides to our farm. Well, depends on who you talk to. From a cattle grazing aspect, the amount of woods we have would be a downside, but from a pastured pork perspective, we don't have enough woods. And so we're looking into and utilizing pastured pork to create these silvo pastures for cattle, sheep, goats, layers, broilers, the whole 9 yards.
Very good. And just a quick plug for the podcast. We have an episode coming up in about a month about silvopastors that I think is going to be very interesting for our audience. Tell us a little bit more about the grazing operation with your hogs.
Oh, sounds good. So our hogs are, yeah, they are grazed through our woods, and we utilize either Premier One hog netting for when we're starting piglets that we source from a local farmer. And once we kind of get them trained to hog wire or the electric netting and our system, they get moved to a two-strand polywire paddock with O'Brien step-ins that we move every 10 to 15 days, just kind of depending on time and what kind of disturbance we want to make. So right now our moves are longer because we're targeting some of the bigger stumps in the area that we want to get rid of. And instead of grinding them or anything like that, we're letting our hogs get underneath them and kind of expose them, and then we will gather all the dead wood that is fallen in the paddocks or undesirable trees we have cut, and we will build fires on top of those stumps and burn them out.
Oh, yes. And does the two wires hold your pigs in pretty good?
Yeah, it does. We actually had a pig that would jump over them, so we had to move
Oh,
each wire up one notch, and we have not had any problems since.
good, good. That's interesting to jump over it. Is this
Yeah.
how many years have you done the hogs?
It will be coming up on a year in April.
Oh, okay. Well, I was kind of curious how that's changing your woodland area over, but that'll have to be a conversation for another time. But are you seeing some changes there that you're liking?
Definitely, we're on our third batch of hogs through this one particular woodland area that we're using as our test site. And once this third batch kind of continues to move through, we're coming back through with our grass finished beef and just some dry fescue hay. And that will be in about another couple weeks. Then we will utilize the hogs on top of that to disturb the hay mat that was created, and then we'll follow those up with our layers.
Oh, yes.
Probably April, I hope to have it disturbed by pigs and then by layers, and then it should be kind of prepped for spring growth.
Oh, very good. And you mentioned your layers. Do you rotate those through your farm as well?
Yep, we utilize our layers. We built a chicken wagon or a whatever you got, whatever people call them, but it's got actually the floor of our chicken wagon is um, old confinement hog flooring, and so we utilize our layers to target undernourished ground. So ground we see that either has a bunch of blackberry bushes or brome sedge. We park our layers on top of it and just use all their droppings to flood those areas with nutrients.
Very good. And you've got those blackberry briars. I think I saw some pictures of goats. Do you have goats as well?
Yeah, so in our we have a couple of pet goats now,
Oh, yeah.
but so for our pastured pork operation, our goats more tie into them. So for our pastured pork operation, we were going through behind them and cutting the buckbrush and the rose bushes. We were
Oh,
cutting
yes.
those by hand, spending a couple hours a week, and I thought that was pretty dumb, waste of time. And so we bought a couple goats and built a goat tractor and started moving them behind our pigs. But we ran into a few things when it got dry in the summer. The pigs were making the stems of the plants we wanted them to eat. They were making them kind of dirty, either
Oh, yes.
with mud or dust, and so the goats were getting picky and not wanting to eat them. So we ended up having to
Oh,
to sell the goats, but
oh, yeah.
we tried using them. But now we just leave our pigs a little longer. We found that if we leave our pigs a little longer, they'll root up those plants, and then all we got to do is pick up the plants off the ground and throw them on a pile.
Oh, yeah. We talked a little bit about forages, and I failed to ask, have you planted anything in your forages, or you just using your grazing pressure to modify your plant species?
Great question. Yes, exactly. We have not planted anything. We are using the latent seed bank, so the seeds that have been deposited throughout the hundreds of years that plants have been growing on the earth, millions of years, and just utilizing our cattle to create the right environment for more beneficial plants to grow. And we also do some bale grazing and some hay unrolling. One of our big projects and experiments we're doing is utilizing bale grazing on our blackberry patches. So we've got
Oh,
some
okay.
uh, farms that have got pretty good sized blackberry patches, probably acres per paddock, and so we're putting out bales and bale grazing on top of those, and we're feeding 250 head of cattle on top of these blackberry patches, and that's about the only thing that we have found that will alter a blackberry.
They're pretty tolerant. They're not something you get rid of real easy.
No, they almost like to be brush hogged.
Yes. So you're rotating your cattle. How
Yes,
are you
sir.
watering them?
Well, we have a really good state soil and water district, and they have quite a bit of cost share funding. And that's put on by the Missouri State. I think it's like a parks tax. So 1/10 of 1% of a state park tax goes to this for land improvement, grazing improvement portion. So we have utilized them, our state cost share, and as well as equip, and all of our pastures, majority of our pastures, I should say. 40 of our 46 pastures are serviced by well water.
Oh, yes.
And so we utilize 10-acre paddocks is what we found we like the best, and each 10 acres has access to a well water tank. And our favorite tanks are tire tanks because it can service the number of head we need it to service.
Oh, yes. And do you have underground pipe ran to them all?
Yep. Underground pipes ran to them all, and actually, we just came up with this new design. So they've got quick couplers inside of them, so we can our pig trailer. Our pigs are live in a cattle trailer with a confinement floor, and so we that allows them. They're trained to go in there every night, and so we can pack them up, move them over to any paddock we want, plug in our pig trailer, and we've got water, and then we just jump out with solar chargers and our pig netting or poly wire, and we can utilize our pigs wherever we want. And same with our broiler, or same with our layers. Our layer housing has a quick coupler, so we can plug in and go wherever we want on our farm.
Oh, very nice. That's definitely expands what you can do with those quick couplers there
Yeah,
on
yeah.
your yeah. And on your solar chargers. What kind of chargers are you using?
We're using just kind of the bigger speed right ones. I'd like to switch
Yes.
over to live wire in Nebraska and pick up some of their homemade Cyclops chargers, and switch all of our future chargers to Cyclops. We're using Power Wizard right now. I think they're 36 joule Power Wizards, and we want to jump over. We've got five 36 joule ones. We'd like to switch all over to Cyclops in the near future.
Oh, yes. And are those run on solar power?
No, those are all 110 or 210
Oh, we got them all plugged in. Very good.
plugged in. Yeah, we just have one speed right solar, but
Oh, okay.
we've got a lot of cross fences. So all of
Oh, yes.
our paddocks are single or two strand high tensile.
Oh, okay. Well, August, we're at the time in our podcast where we ask our famous four questions. They're the same four questions we ask of each of our guests.
Sounds good.
So, our first question: what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Well, I really like both of Greg Judy's books. I don't have them right in front of me, so I don't want to say the titles because I don't know right offhand. But those are both kind of go-to books with our grass grazing business. There you go.
See,
Comeback
I
Farm.
had one
Yep.
sitting right here.
Yeah, that one.
Comeback Farms and then No Risk Ranching.
Yeah, and No Risk Ranching was his first one, right?
Yes.
So I actually read I got that book for Christmas, and when I was a government employee, I took the week between Christmas and New Year's to read both of those books because I was the only guy in the office. So
Yes.
don't tell anybody.
Yeah, we won't tell anyone. We'll keep that on the down low.
Sounds good. Another good book is Dirt to Soil, Gabe Brown's book. That's
Oh, yes.
that's a I highly recommend that one. And then another book, it's not talked about too much, but it's Nourishment by Fred Provenza. And I really like hearing Fred Provenza speak.
Nourishment. That's a book I'm not familiar with, so I will have to look that up.
Yeah, it's about why do and why do animals graze what they graze? Basically. So allowing them to select what they need in their diet. You provide, as a farmer, you provide the forages they need, and then they'll select a balanced diet.
Oh, very good. I will have to look that up. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, yep, good book.
Our second question: what tool could you not live without on your farm?
That's a good question. Um, could I say my four wheeler outfitted with my step in post poly wire and two cattle dogs?
That sounds like an excellent tool.
It's a go to everyday tool that we use would be our four wheeler with our step in post poly wire and our two dogs.
And are the dogs, did you train them? Did you buy trained dogs?
No, I bought puppies and trained them ourselves.
Oh, yes.
And
Very good.
and our cattle are broke to move when we call them, but they work really well. Our dogs are handy when moving through pastures. So if we got a paddock or two we don't want to graze, but we need to get our cows through to get to another paddock, like warm season grass, if we want to graze some warm season grass, we can use our dogs to move through the pastures we don't want to graze. Also, when getting them really tight for ultra high density, the dogs work great to put the cows in tighter spaces.
Oh, very good. Bill Fosier, in one of our earlier episodes, I don't have the number right in front of me, but he uses border collies with his sheep, and he's really high on his border collies.
Yeah, yeah. Ours are rough, tough dogs, but they're sometimes we have our good and bad days.
Like we all do.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question is: what would you tell someone just starting on this regenerative journey or grass farmer journey?
I'd say learn as much as you can and visit with as many people as possible. There's so much to learn, and there's so many things that can be done. There's so many things that can be seen from visiting other people's, and don't be afraid to experiment, even if it doesn't work out. I mean, that's where we've for every one thing that's worked out, we've had 10 to 20 different things that didn't work out. But just utilizing the template, which would be Mother Nature, and and uh, seeing what did that humans have wrecked, but bison and elk and deer and other ruminants grazing, just, it's pretty simple. Just follow what Mother Nature laid out for us.
Great advice. And where can others find out more about you?
Good question. So we've got a website, www.horstmann, HORSTMANN, cattleco.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at horstmanncattleco.com or Horstmann Cattle Co. I don't, I don't know. I'm not the Instagram person, but it's Horstmann Cattle Co. And you can just call me directly or email us at ah@horstmanncattleco.com.
We will put those links in our show notes so our audience has them available.
That sounds good. That'll be better than me telling them about it.
Yeah, well, oh, it's so much easier to click a link than try and type it in.
Yes, sir.
August, we appreciate you coming on sharing your journey with us and telling us about your operation.
No problem. It's just getting started too. We're only. I was did an interview with Understanding Ag, and just to think about where we've been in 3 years is pretty crazy.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well,
So,
I'm excited for you to continue on your journey.
I appreciate it. I thank you for having us on. It was an honor.
I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation with August. And as we mention with every show, we have those show notes at our website. If you go to grazinggrass.com, you can go to the episode you want to see, and there's show notes underneath there. With each show note, we try and link to any resources the guest may have received, as well as Amazon links for the books. Now, I encourage you to shop local and support an independent bookseller. But if you're not finding the book mentioned on our podcast, check out our show note links. If you click on the link to Amazon and purchase it, we get a small amount back, and we appreciate you supporting our podcast. Now is your chance to ask your question. Go to grazinggrass.com and click on Ask Your Question. Complete the form, and we will have a future episode with our guest asking your question, because I know you can ask better questions than I do. You've just listened to the Grazing Grass podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. We encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, share our episodes with others, and leave us a review where you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep grazing grass.